Hello, picked up. Hello, YouTube. New video, new luck, same old freshness. And that's because of the big discussion about our new heroes from the Fusion Tholin Fallbart. There's been a bit of, a little discussion, a bit of controversy brewing. I've received a lot of comments, whether it's on Discord or in the YouTube comments. How is it possible, easy, that content creator A rates the hero so highly and content creator B rates them like this? Why do you have different opinions, and so on and so forth? And of course, the reason for that is that every content creator evaluates the hero for themselves, and the tests they do independently for themselves. And most of the time when we're finally allowed to release our videos, we also have a little internal discussion. How did you see it? And the opinions really varied a lot. And that's why I've now thought, because a decisive criterion which came up very often also with other content creators, and I read it a lot in the comments, was that this hero was compared to another hero, namely our old fusion Thor. The argument was often made, if I have a Thor, then I don't need this one because Thor easily outdamages him. Why would I want a Tholin if I have a Thor? And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. We're going to do a one-to-one comparison between Tholin and Thor. This isn't meant to, to push my own advice on you guys. I did say, do the fusion. If you have the resources, definitely. You won't be disappointed. He's a strong damage dealer and so on. It's not about confirming that, but rather maybe convincing one or two of you to go for the fusion after all. Because, and unfortunately, this is something I see quite often and have to remind myself of again and again, that when I do account support, people write to me, hey, Easy, can you take a look? Can you take a look? And can you build me a team for Hydra? Could you maybe do something for Spider? And then I go onto the account and see that almost none of the fusions have been done. And it's often heroes that would actually help you clear the content. Of course, that's not the only deciding factor. Yeah, greed is still obviously an essential part. But there are a lot of people out there who right from the start said, well, the content creator talked so badly about him, so we don't need to do it either. And now let's compare him to one of the best damage dealers in this game. Without a doubt, I'd go so far as to say that Thor is probably the best damage dealer for people who are currently playing and have him in their Hydra team, that they hardly have anything better on their account. We're really talking about an absolute top tier damage dealer here, yeah. Also on my account, well, I have to admit I was lucky and pulled a 6-star soul for him, so of course he automatically made it into the team. But still, Thor is just an insanely good damage dealer, and now we're comparing him more new fusion with one of the best damage dealers in the entire game. And for that I built both heroes. So let's just compare both heroes and see what their stats are. Both have Arlet start from the beginning. Both have 6 pieces of Relentless equipped, right? I'm now creating exactly the same conditions for both heroes. 6 pieces of Relentless for Thor, 6 pieces of Relentless. So let's see, both have a 6-star blessing, Neither of them has a relic equipped for this test, because I wouldn't say, well, they're a bit dependent on how many debuffs are applied and so on, blah, blah, blah. We're leaving all of that out completely. We're looking purely at the damage without any damage boosts or outside influences. Let's take a look at this. Both have the Crushing Rend, right? You can see it here as well. And both also have exactly the same masteries. That's very, very important. So now let's look at the stats. We'll start with Tholin. I built Tholin. He currently has 8,200 attack. That's obviously a lot, guys. And I know there were always comments with the argument, yeah, no one ever reaches those kinds of stats. But I explained in the video that in order to test a damage dealer in a way that's representative for me, I have to test him with my best gear. Because then I can say, this damage dealer keeps up with Ninja, keeps up with Thor, keeps up with X, keeps up with whomever. I have to relate it to my own account to have a point of comparison. I can't compare him to a Skull Crusher, because I haven't played a Skull Crusher in 5 years. That's completely normal. So, 8,200 attack. Thor, let's go over there right away. 8,200 attack. Then let's go to Tholin, look, 243 speed. Thor, 243 speed. And then we'll also look at the crit damage value, because of course that also plays a role. With Tholin we have 312 and with Thor we're at 314. In other words, both have 8,200 attack, both have exactly the same speed, and Thor now has 2% more crit damage. That's completely negligible in battle. As I said, both are ruthless, both have exactly the same stats. And the first argument, I actually had that yesterday on stream as well, was that Tholin isn't necessarily better in the waves. Let's take a look. We'll see how long it takes us to reach the boss with Tholin and how long it takes with Thor. So let's start with Tholin, I'd say. Stage 6 before the dragon. Just pick the random dungeon now. Alright, wave 1, 3 seconds. Wave 2. Okay, they get another turn. No big deal. Boom, boom. So we're at the boss in, 13 seconds. Okay, 13 seconds to the boss. Okay, now let's do the same with Thor. I've created team setups for both heroes, so we have the optimal setup for each. Of course, Thor's A2 is the one that hits really hard. So 13 seconds for Tholin and for Thor. A bit unlucky, he could have died already. You have to give him that. So. Yeah, 14 seconds. But it could have been 12 or 13 as well. Yeah, both die at the boss, obviously, because the team isn't tuned for it. It's not supposed to be a dragon, but you can already see. Oops, they really don't differ at all in the waves. Of course, you have to argue now, and I think that was always a killer argument for many people who said, oh, I'm not convinced by that. Yeah, the damage isn't actually that high. I think the biggest difference, or one of the biggest differences, is a visual one. We all know Thor's A2, for example, with the Hydra. Let's take Hydra as the decisive content. We love it. Why? Because it can also visibly deal an incredible amount of damage. But don't forget, guys, it only comes every 3 turns. And with Tholin, it's like this. With Tholin, he doesn't do that insane AoE damage with a single attack where we'd all say, wow, that's crazy, that's intense. But he deals damage consistently every time it's his turn. So pretty much always, actually he always does, because he can deal good damage with his basic attack. The A3 is a bit weaker, which is actually a good thing, because you should actually disable it in a Hydra fight, for example, or in a Chimera fight. What I'm trying to say is, don't always just focus on the visuals, on how much damage a hero seems to do visually, but instead just look at the numbers in your Hydra fight or Chimera fight, or even in the waves, if you like. That's why it's always there's always a lot of emphasis placed on appearances. So now let's go into the Hydra fight. As I said, both heroes have exactly the same equipment. I've just set up the team now. We have both Tholin and Thor in here. You can also see the stats on the right. This is now with the Hydra bonus included. 8, 5, 8, 5. Same speed, crit damage 244, 242, 342. Exactly the same, right? Team setup created. We have Firo with us. We have Lydia, and Sophia is our reviver. And now we'll just let the run go for a few minutes, because this is quite interesting. And I think this is also something that a lot of people massively underestimate. Specifically, it's about Tholin's A2. Tholin increases his attack value by 50%. That's a lot, that's not a small amount. Don't underestimate that. Of course, this will play a bigger role in future content. The higher the attack value, Eisen, the higher it is, the greater those 50% he increases become. In the early game, it doesn't make a huge difference. You probably won't even really notice it, but as the game progresses, you'll definitely feel those 50%. Thor also gives himself a crit damage boost. That's part of his kit, but we'll leave that aside for now. And now we'll just do a little comparison. I'll let this run go up to about 30 or 40 million, and then we'll stop it. And you'll notice one thing. Thor has dealt significantly more damage than Tholin. That's also the case at the beginning of the run. It takes a while for Tholin to reach his full potential, because he first has to max out his A2, his attack value. That's why we'll just let the run continue. This should run without any problems now. It's a relatively tanky team. It's not really something you should try to copy or anything like that. Although I have to say, the two of them together in one team work really, really well. Tholin applies weakening, Thor applies the speed decrease. Those are 2 essential debuffs, so 2 very good debuffs against the Hydra. And having those combined with damage at the same time is an awesome combo. Just wanted to quickly mention that here. So, let's continue. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go up to, 25, 30 million, I'd say. And then we'll just compare the damage values of both heroes with exactly the same gear, same conditions, and so on. Alright, 17 million. Here comes Thor. Nice A1. Now Tholin comes in with the A2. 1.7 million. Okay. Of course, it also depends a bit if Thor gets another turn and can land a big hit here. Yeah, the A3 is okay, then the passive kicks in again. But Tholin will probably get another turn as well. Alright, there he goes again. And that's what I mean. Now you've seen it. That's just now the A3 didn't look like it did that much damage. But it adds up. It really adds up. And of course, Thor, I mean, with his A2, if he lets that loose once and all the heads pop off, wow, that's some insanely massive damage. But with Tholin, the damage comes in kind of quietly, sneaking in from behind, so silent and subtle. It's not like that one big hit where I deal a ton of damage at once, although I have to say the A2 definitely hits a lot harder as a single target attack than for example, Tholin's one. You really have to be honest about that. So now we're at 37. I'm going to stop now. Wait a second. Let's let Thor have another turn. If he gets another turn, just to keep it fair. Okay, he doesn't get another fair turn. He doesn't get another fair turn. Hold on. Does he get another turn? All right, we'll take this one with us. Okay. And now let's take a look at the stats. Now, most likely, exactly, Thor will have more than Tholin, right? Actually, yes, about a quarter more. You could say it's roughly 25% more than our Tholin. In other words, the point clearly goes to Thor, right? A quarter more is definitely not a small amount. But now I'm going to make a cut and let the run go up to 100 million. I'm going to start the run again. The same run. I'm going to make a quick cut now and then I'll check back in 5 or 10 minutes when we've reached 100 million. And then we'll take another look at the same thing. So, see you in a bit. Alright, we're back. It took 8 minutes. Now we're almost at 100 million and we're about to stop it. And then we'll just compare after 100 million. So who did more damage now? Alright, there we had Thor again in first place. Let's let our Tholin have another turn so things are a bit more balanced, although it doesn't really matter. And let's see, have they gotten closer now? Earlier it was a 25% difference. Now it's 36 to 42. In other words, they've evened out. You can see the difference isn't that big anymore. And probably this is kind of what I want to get at in this video. Yeah, we all love Thor. We all know Thor, an amazing damage dealer. And if you compare this here with exactly the same stats, you'll notice there's really no difference. Pretty much none at all. And now, to really test this a bit more, we're going to do another quick battle. We'll use my last 2 quick battles and just compare the stats again in a full fight. A few things do play a role, of course. How often does Thor die? How often does Tholin die? How often does Tholin get eaten? How often does Thor get eaten? I know all that, but you'll still get a basic idea, because I've read that Thor is supposedly so much better than our fusion. Well, let's just let it run. It probably won't go all the way to the end. At least that's what I think. Well, or maybe? No. Ah, that was nothing. If we look now, Thor has 82, Tholin 82, and Thor 100. But it was a very short run, 150 moves. Ended relatively quickly, but even there you can see Thor ahead of Tholin again. Yeah, that much ahead of Tholin. Number. And that's why we'll do it again. Let's check again. Let's check again. Hopefully it'll go a bit better this time. Yeah, now it's going better. Now it's going better. Alright, now we're getting a nice value. So we can see Thor is at 216 million and Tholin at 188 million. And that's just a tiny bit better. Really only minimal. And as I said, anyone who plays and knows Thor will know how awesome Thor is. And Tholin, as you can see, comes pretty close to the same. There's only a minimal difference here that you have. And of course, we have to say, we're talking about Hydra here. And Hydra is Thor's #1 specialty. If we were to continue this with the Chimera, Tholin would actually outdamage Thor by a significant margin, because Thor is really only suited for AoE. His A1 is okay now if it triggers multiple times. Tholin, on the other hand, has a very, very good A2 by default, which can deal good damage, making it more useful against the Chimera. That's why with the Chimera, it would probably lean more towards Tholin, while with the Hydra, it's slightly in favor of Thor. So I would say, I would put the heroes on the same level and maybe just really, yeah, consider one or the other, especially for those who commented that Thor easily outdamages him and so on. It's not that clear cut. They're on the same level, basically completely even. And then there's also the aspect that Tholin can't be critted, which makes it significantly easier to keep him alive. So there are plenty of arguments to say that Tholin is at least as good as Thor. Alright folks, maybe this serves as a little eye-opener for some of you out there who were still unsure about whether to go for the fusion or not. I did it specifically today because I think today you can still complete all the events to get the fusion after all. So in that sense, you now have a point of comparison. I also don't want to badmouth any other content creator, God forbid. I just don't want you to skip a hero because of something person X or Y said and then realize 2 or 3 months later, oh, that hero actually wasn't so bad, I should have gone for them. So for anyone who has the resources and needs a good damage dealer for Hydra, and just to make this absolutely clear, this isn't about saying that Tholin is now the new best damage dealer in Raid Shadow Legends. No, of course not. There are still much better heroes out there. But for the vast majority of players, he is definitely a very, very, very good damage dealer. Period. That's it. End of story. There's really nothing more to discuss about that. He won't be making it into my best team. No, because I have better alternatives. I have a 6-star ninja. I also have a Theox, and they just do more, you know, period. But not everyone has that. And especially for those people, Tholin is definitely a very, very good fusion. With that said, guys, drop a comment and let me know if you like this comparison, if we should maybe do this more often actually, comparing a current fusion, especially with damage dealers. It's always ideal with an older fusion, so you really have a point of reference. And with the same gear and so on and so forth, so that we actually get a meaningful and significant value. So check out the comments and then I'll see you in the next video. Yours easy. 2-2.